introduction. I'll get Michael to introduce himself when I hand the baton over. So again, my name's Glenn Guilford. I run, fortunate to run a small specialist company called The Next Level, and we ply our trade, which is called sales team optimisation, to a whole range of different companies in different industries. So some are manufacturers, some will be distributors, and some will be service providers. But moreover, we exist in the passionate belief that those sales organisations, those B2B sales organisations that actually run their annual sales team optimisation as an integral part of their whole of company annual budgeting will actually rise to the challenge that's been impacted on all of us in B2B sales organisation land since the GFC, where the constant pressure to actually justify the expense and the relevance of an expensive sales team is becoming harder and harder, and these organisations will become the beacons, the leading lights that will show us the way from B2B to B4B, whereby their customers will see that the value delivered by the role of the sales execs will be as valuable or even more valuable than the actual company's services and products that they're purchasing. And so therefore, for our little part in this world, we help organisations like that trying to make that transition by deploying parts or all of our sales system, our sales team optimisation system, to help them model, map, design, plan and measure sales team productivity and return. And we do that by working collaboratively, transferring tools, skills and knowledge to our clients. And so the Next Level is not only the name of our company, but it's the name of this particular sales system. And by definition, so it's a sales team optimisation and sales exec effectiveness system that can be tailored for any business-to-business sales organisation. And it can be thought of as an end-to-end suite of modelers, designers and mappers that enable organisations looking to make this transition to review, challenge and renew sales team utilisation, strategy and benchmarks. It's all around optimising the sales process, system and the sales team's performance. So, what is sales team optimisation? To help me sort of put a little bit of a definition to that question, it's useful to paint a little bit of a background picture. By our numbers, we reckon there's around about 40,000 B2B sales organisations across Australia. And again, as I mentioned before, they come from all walks of life. Some will be manufacturers, some distributors, some service providers. And when you look at the common threads that tie together these relatively disparate types of organisations, the first thing that we notice is, from a sales organisation point of view, they're all sub-optimised. The only difference is the degree. The other thing that ties them together is that these organisations typically tend to have at least a handful of the classic on-the-road warrior type sales execs who are plying a large heterogeneous collection of customers and prospects, making repeat visits that align with the customer's requirement to make repeat reorders of the company's consumable products or services. And the final characteristic is that those customers actually have quite a readily switchable supplier choice. These tend to be the characteristics of sales organisations, sales teams that lend themselves to sales team optimisation. And so therefore, as definition, it is the analytics that align sales team design and process to the classified customer base and the profile prospect pool in order to ensure maximum productivity and return investment from that resource available. It is indeed the science of engineering a sales team to a tailored system, which in turn is all around mobilising that resource to best utilisation for best realisation. Now that's a very technical kind of definition, so if I break that down, it really is having a sales system in which the team can operate to ensure that at any time, at any day, they've got the best chance of seeing the right person at the right time, at the right frequency, for the right reason, delivering the right value within the right business relations framework. Really, that's what sales team optimisation is all about. So we have been running these breakfast seminars now for about a year. This in fact is the fourth in our series, and we typically tend to chip off a particular topic in this sort of sequence which aligns to a classic sales team optimisation journey sequence. So for those of you who remember gathering here about a year ago when we did our inaugural breakfast seminar, in this series at least, we looked at the virtues of assessing your current productivity and return. So I'm just going to do a very quick synopsis for those of you who've missed some of the seminars so that I can then segue into today's topic, which is all around upgrading your sales system. So when we kicked off, we looked at what I call, and I still call, the sales team law of gravity. Why law of gravity? Because this particular equation has existed. It's always existed. In fact, it's immutable and irrefutable. All we did is just write it down. And the choice that you have as sales team, as sales organisations, is to either ignore it or harvest it. So we looked at some examples of how leading organisations are harvesting the actual principles here and running their modelling against these 8 productivity and economic drivers and using them as levers to maximise their sales team optimisation and return. And we looked at some examples of that. We looked at some productivity examples, like, for example, visit drive time ratio. We looked at the virtues of an organisation running the ruler and getting its own performance level and comparing that to the cross-industry standards to start to look at where the low-hanging fruit are. We looked at some of the economic drivers. Classic one here being cost of visit. Again, an organisation's value in assessing its own cost of visit and running that against the cross-industry standards to see how we sit and whether we've got the right cost effectiveness. And then we looked at the importance of actually running your sales team optimisation exercise in a strategic framework. You can't maximise everything. You have to work out what you're going to set, what you're going to optimise for, and what you're going to maximise. And finally then in that first breakfast seminar, we looked at how to then go about calculating the return on the investment of your sales team optimised effort and what it's going to return on in terms of revenue and margin against the cost. We then moved across into our second topic, which was around renewing sales strategy, sales team strategy. And here we looked at the importance of really analysing, articulating and documenting the value chain environment in which you operate. You know, who are the buyers? Who are the non-buying value adders? Who are the specifiers? Who are the end users? And really understanding who adds value, how do they add value, and what type of value they add. And we even looked at some examples of some modelling of that particular type of scenario in order to determine the question, well, having understood that, then where do we place our sales team resource in order to influence the buyer's behaviour in accordance to the type of value they add. And that then led us into then the sales team alignment. We looked at some example models of that to show, are we aligning our sales team organisation therefore in the right importance and the right segments in the value chain to line up to where we had the maximum influence. And then for those of you who were here in May, I think it was, our most recent one, we looked at generating and gathering the data for your sales team optimisation. And we had a look at the 6 important tranches of data that you need to gather to do this exercise properly. CV, current value, so that's the notion of gathering the sales, either revenue or margin, from every one of your customers, from your biggest Goliath all the way through to all your little rats and mice, both direct sales and indirect sales. And same thing with PV, potential value. So what is the throughput, what is the consumption, what is the value of your customer for the whole category in which you compete. Cost of sale, cost to serve data, very important. Some basic internal sales team productivity and return data, overlaid with some basic external competitor sales team and market data. And then the 6th tranche is this sales exec activity time allocation. So that's getting the sales execs in the team to actually document what they do, how they do, why they do, and how much time they're spending on those various activities. And we had a look at a bit of an example of one of those analyses, which shows the importance of having good data to assess office time to territory time and some of the other lower level ratios I mentioned, visit to drive time ratios. So that will show back to my classic sales team optimisation equation on the left-hand side, where the productivity improvements might lie in terms of increasing visit capacity and visit value. As well as then feeding the left-hand side, this particular tranche of data comes together with the other tranches of data I mentioned, the CV, the PV, share of wallet, cost of visit from cost of sale to cost of serve, to come together in a mathematical way to scatterplot classify the customers. And that is my segue to the little synopsis of the ground we've covered thus far and the topic I'm going to share with you this morning. So it is around upgrading the selling systems, and today I'm going to talk about the quantitative part of that and then invite you back when we have our next seminar where I'm going to explore the qualitative part. Okay, so we at the next level do believe that an objective scientific means to classify the customers for competitive advantage is the foundation for upgrading your selling systems on an annual basis as an integral part of your sales team optimisation. So, let's have a look at the principles underpinning classification to deliver competitive advantage. Number one, customers are profiled not only on current value, which too many organisations do alone, full stop, and that's the end of the story, but also potential value as well. The process features objectivity and rigour both in the data inputs and the classification outputs. Sales exec input, therefore, is the subjective part is minimised and becomes just a back-end overlay for any interventions on a case-by-case as merits depict basis. Consistency in process and outcomes, so we do it the same, the whole team over every state of Australia. The process and the data is refresh and update on an appropriate cycle. For most organisations that would be annual. And the output should be a platform for then defining and reviewing and redefining your in-field targeting activity benchmarks, as well as looking at using the outputs to then review and assess and challenge your resourcing levels, your deployment and your actual structural modelling of your sales team. So, pictorially and illustratively, that's what the scatter plot looks like. And I'm actually going to then just pull it apart and put it back together again to actually show you how those 6 tranches of data come together to form a tool like this. Alright, so I'm going to start with the data that represents cost of sale and cost to serve. Because with that data, you can then calculate your cost of visit, and the formula is actually quite simple. It's nothing more than total cost of sales plus total cost to serve divided by the total team visit capacity. Where the real value and the difficulty is in actually gathering the right data for cost of sale, cost to serve to actually adequately allocate it across each head in your team. And the principles here are allocating all your direct costs to support the salespeople managing the given customer base that's in question. And that includes the cost to the company to fully recruit, train, mobilise, equip, pay and remunerate the sales team, each member of the sales team, the sales management overlay and any internal sales or telesales team that are also supporting the sales exec by applying their service to the same customer base that the sales team are visiting. Plus, any service support that's again directly serving the same customer base. So this might be depending on your product, service, nature, industry. It might be a customer service call centre, a quotation processing department, a technical support department. Phil, if I think about your old company, sending the technical guys out on site, we would count that into the cost of serve. And then using one of our modelers, the output might look something like this, where the numbers all crunch through. And in this particular example, living, breathing example, I've just taken the name out to protect the innocent. $201 is the cost of a visit. 5 visits is deemed as the minimum visits that equate to account management. And so therefore the cost of sales here is $1,000. You turn that into the actual margin on top for the revenue, and that means that every member in this sales team now knows that for a customer to break even, just to break even and pay for the cost of minimum visit, minimum account management is the equivalent of $1,800 in sales. So that particular figure actually then forms this first line here, which is what we sometimes call the picket fence. It's the picket fence that separates those customers that on current value today and potential value tomorrow do not pay for the minimum cost of account management, so siphon them off for lower cost telesales, customer centre support or other lower cost forms of looking after. So those of you who were here in May might remember my little outline of the CV shape of curve. So I'm going back to my first of my 6 tranches of data, CV, current value. So this is the current value contribution, revenue or margin from every customer in your customer base back to your business. And the use and the value in terms of doing that by lining them up from your biggest Goliath to all your little rats and mice. So in this example, the blue curve is the real curve of the particular customer in question. The red curve is the classic Pareto, 80-20, 10-10, 10-7. So you can see how your shape of curve compares to the classic. And in this particular living, breathing example, we see what we call the Pareto peak, 72-28 rather than 80-20. The midriff, 13-13 instead of 10-10. And the tail end Charlie's 15-59 instead of the classic 10-7. So that becomes a useful analysis on its own and one of the critical inputs into the classification scatter plot. So too, in a similar way, the PV shape of curve. So same principles, same dynamics at play here. Again, useful piece of analysis on its own and another critical input into the classification scatter plot and the boundaries on that separate the customers into their tiers. And here we can see the scatter plot starting to emerge now. So here are the green lines that represent the Pareto peak, the midriff and the tail end Charlie cut-off points from the CV shape of curve. Here are the green lines hitting the PV axis that represent the Pareto peak, midriff and tail end Charlies that we've just seen from the PV shape of curve. And here the pink line then starts to become the share of wallet, the CV-PV ratio for the populations in each horizontal tier. And so customer classification, scatter plotting of course is just one of many, many different ways that customers can classify their customers. We happen to think it's the best one, and the reason we do is because it is a graphical representation of CV and PV data for all customers in the base. It scientifically, objectively and consistently assesses all customers relative to each other. It's like putting everyone on the same playing field. Assist classification into customer groupings based on similarity of CV and PV, both magnitude and ratio. The graph is segmented into 5 different classes. What we call loyal and cultivate classes, tier 1 and tier 2. And then the cellar dwellers class which I've alluded to already as being down in the apex of the graph and separated by the mathematical picket fence defined by the cost of visit from cost of sale and cost to serve. So here it is now starting to come together in my illustrative diagram. So imagine for yourself you've got your CV data for all of your customers, biggest Goliath to all your rats and mice, and by hook or by crook, that's another topic for another seminar altogether, how to collect your PV data. So imagine you've got that and you're putting it on the horizontal axis of your graph. So the data point comes together now. You've got 2 data points for every one of your customers now on the same playing field, which we call the scatter plot graph. All of the mathematics and algorithms that sit behind what we've seen, CV shape of curve, PV shape of curve, share of wallet curves, cost of visit, cost of serve, now all come together to create the boundaries of separation and classification upon a mathematically defensible basis. And so the classes then start to come together, and you can call whatever names you like. We've just got our own sort of terminology. Here's the cellar dwellers I mentioned before, the tier 2s, the loyal. Why loyal? High CV from relatively low PV. That's where you've got high share of wallet. They're your loyal customers, so that depicts the type of account management that they deserve. Here are your cultivate customers, low CV from moderate to high PV. They're the big guys that your competition's got that you'd love to get their action, so you need to cultivate them. That suggests their type of account management. Your stars, and that's how it looks in a real life example out of one of our models. So then falling out of that, you can then start to exactly enumerate and identify who and how many customers belong in each class. And you can start to do your first bit of modelling post the scatter plot by saying, do we want to be conservative with our cost of visit, cost to serve, and just break even? Or some of our clients say, no, we want a premium above that, and therefore driving up the cellar dweller population at the expense of some of the tier 2s. So that depends on, again, having a clear view of your strategic direction of your STO exercise, knowing what you're setting, what you're optimising, what you're maximising. And then you can come back to my classic equation, because you've already put a peg in the sand now. Of your 8 levers that you've got to pull, you've now actually determined the number of customers in each class, and now you can go away and start modelling as much as you like. Umpteen permutations and combinations of running this equation, so that, like a pseudo accounting equation, your left-hand side always has to equal your right-hand side. So let's have a look at that as I now finish up. So I'm going to run a very simple example, an overly simplistic example to demonstrate my point. Thinking about the left-hand side in one way as your cost base, and the right-hand side as your revenue base, and of course return on investment. What you're trying to do is get the most revenue from the optimum cost to be expended. So let's pretend your resource level is 10, the full-time equivalent of 10 sales exhibits. And let's say that they are doing 45 weeks a year, 4.5 days per week, and 6 visits per day whilst on territory. And let's say you've done a classification exercise like I've just demonstrated, and you've now worked out how many loyals, how many stars, how many cultivates, what your visit frequency is going to be for competitive advantage, and how much you're going to leave tucked up your sleeve as unallocated visits for the inevitable ad hoc needs that will be required from time to time above what you can plan in a calendar 12 months in advance with your customers. And let's also accommodate for your prospects. Let's say in this example we've got 370 prospects who are going to be allocated 5 visits per annum to convert or walk away. So you do the math, 12,150 on the left-hand side, 5,900 allocated visits to classified customers, nearly 1,500 unallocated, tucked up the sleeve for a rainy day, and nearly 2,000 for your hunting. Now mathematically, the left-hand side doesn't equal the right-hand side, but this is a good scenario because you've actually got capacity to burn here, so you've got positive types of options. When we do this exercise for many of our customers, it's actually the reverse. And we find that in fact the left-hand side is smaller than the right-hand side, and usually our customers go through an experience, we have a very technical term for it, we call it the oh shit experience. Oh shit, I thought all my reps were covering all my stars and cultivates and laws to this extent, and they tell me they are, but mathematically you've just proven that that's not possible. And thus the value of getting your modelling right to set up your sales team optimisation to then go and implement and measure. So that's where I'm going to finish for today. That's a quick look into what I'm going to call the quantitative part of upgrading your selling systems, getting those things right first, and then next time we come back together, I'm then going to go into the qualitative part of upgrading your selling systems. So at this point, I'm going to hopefully just switch over the PowerPoint and get Michael to come up.